Hi, I'm Katie. Thanks for taking a second to listen to my vlog on how I'm living with stage 4 appendix cancer. I became very ill with appendicitis essentially in 2023 and was scheduled for a procedure to have my appendix removed. When I returned for my post-op check, the pathology reported that I did have goblet cell adenocarcinoma of the appendix. Shortly after that, I had a procedure called a right hemicolectomy, where they removed my ascending colon, and they took out my tubes at that time and about 23 lymph nodes, which is common for being able to stage your appendix cancer. That procedure overall went really well. I was able to bounce back, return to work. Just kind of had to watch my diet. Low fiber is always best any kind of time that you're dealing with any kind of bowel procedures, but I returned just fine. And because the margins were clear, no other treatment was recommended for me at that time. The surveillance protocol is CAT scans every 6 months, generally for about 5 to 6 years. And so I had just continued down that path. I then found a wealth of knowledge and a ton of support through a group on Facebook with individuals who are fighting very similar battles, and that has just been a godsend. One of the first things that they're going to tell you is that it's very important to reach out to an appendix specialist. I had just been kind of dealing with the individuals in my hometown, and so I definitely wanted to make sure that I was taken a second look at by them. Found a great team in Detroit, Grosse Pointe, Michigan. Dr. Richard Berry and his team are phenomenal. And so I did go and see them. The reason why you would want to go see a appendix specialist is because you generally are going to have to have other treatments, one particularly called a HIPEC, and I'll explain that a little bit more. But there's only a handful of individuals that are able to do that, and it's very important that you select somebody who is experienced, has done multiple ones, has a stable team, and making that selection is critical. And so I did go see them. At that point, they did a laparoscopic procedure where they took a look inside, and they wanted to just make sure that the cancer had been removed. At that point, they didn't see any residual cancer or tumor burdens left, and also thought that it was fine for me just to continue with the normal 6-month surveillance, which I did. And now we are in 2026, and so like I said, I did feel fine for about 6-9 months after the surgery, and then I kind of started having some abdominal pain again. So I would mention that anytime I was at appointments or different things. Again, blood work was fine, scans were fine, so they suggested I follow up with a GI. So I've kind of spent the last year doing different tests and things with the GI. There were non-cancer related things found, but as far as cancer goes, they weren't ever worried that they had seen anything at that point, even though I was still having a lot of symptoms. I continued to follow with my OBGYN, and also kind of just letting him know some of the lady symptoms that I was having, mostly pain and irregular bleeding. And so beginning of this year, he decided it was best to do a hysterectomy, which I had March of this year. And so he did remove my uterus, and during that procedure he saw a cyst on my right ovary. He said it looked pretty normal in the cyst world, but luckily, knowing my medical history, and he calls it my crazy cancer, he decided to do a biopsy. Again, pathology came back, and they did let me know that my cancer had returned on my ovaries, and now it was showing signet cell features, which essentially means that the cancer has mutated. It's now become more aggressive and sneaky. So I then went and followed back up with the specialist, and that's where we recently, in June, had a CRS surgery and the HIPEC procedure. So the CRS part means that they just go inside. What makes this cancer very difficult to treat, some of them you'll see, I'm sure you probably read, it's called the invisible cancer. So it's very hard to find on scans, PET scans, MRIs, CAT scans. I've had them all. I even had a CAT scan in March, and it did not show the cancer I had, and the tumor on my ovary was pretty significant. It was almost 6 centimeters when it was removed. So it was fairly large, but again, these scans weren't detecting anything. So luckily, I had that procedure, and they were able to find it. So I did go in, and the CRS piece means you kind of got to be prepared. They might not know how bad the tumor burden is until they look inside, and they will remove anything that they need to, anything that doesn't look right or is not colored right, or if they have any concerns. So some patients wake up, they don't have spleens, gallbladders, some have ostomy bags. So there's a lot of things to be prepared for. I fortunately had just my ovaries removed. They did decide to remove both ovaries at that time. There were some momentum and some things that they removed, but no other organs at that time. And so then at that point is when you receive the HIPEC treatment, and that's when they place a machine that gives you a constant cycle of heated chemotherapy. Mine ran for about 90 minutes, and that's ultimately to kill any cancer cells that were left within the abdominal cavity. And so I was also very fortunate, and one thing that I'm excited to share about my journey is that I was able to have that procedure laparoscopic. Generally, most people's story when they have had CRS or HIPEC, they have an incision that is from the top here all the way to the pelvic bone, all the way down. Again, I was able to have laparoscopic, so I just have some marks here, and one at the bottom, but it has probably helped my outcome and my recovery and my particular story a lot better than some you might hear, but it's exciting to share about the possibilities and kind of where things are going with modern medicine. And again, shout out to Dr. Barry's team, because it's so important to pick that right support when you're battling this cancer. And so the standard of care also following the HIPEC procedure is to have 6 months of systemic chemotherapy, which I am getting ready to start on Monday. And so that's kind of where the motivation is to start sharing this journey, though I didn't have any content to share with my previous procedures. They're very fresh. So if you have any questions, anything like that, what to be prepared, what to bring for the hospital, any kind of those things, again, I'd love to help with that. I know I have found a ton of help watching other stories and people's journeys. I just haven't been able to find a lot about our specific appendix cancer, and so I'm hoping this helps with that. I want to share, the good days, the tough days. I'm anxious right now about how I'm going to feel headed into chemotherapy. Of course, am I going to lose my hair? Am I going to be able to return back to normal life, which is, back to my job and work? And so I will be sharing with you kind of how that goes, but I am very optimistic. I was able to handle the HIPEC procedure and the CRS surgery much better than I thought, so I feel really good going into chemo, and I want to be able to share positive things and, how this journey is going to go. So I just want to thank you if you've hung around to the end of my story. Look forward to sharing some more with you in the next chapters, and just remembering that there's always blessings in the battle.